That wasn't me whistling, that was Farmer Bill. Calling in the dogs.
Sit and stay.
Well, I will say that worked quite well. I know. Right. Councillors, can I just say we're now just going to do C, then we'll do D and E, and then we're out of that, and then we're on to a bit of a roll after that, one hopes. But we're basically going to take most of the reports as read, to be quite honest, but there's questions, and I don't mean to be mean about this, but I think we've all had a chance to make an overall broad endorsement speech of things, so don't really need to go over that. So,
right. Do you want to move?
Be moved.
It's been moved. Good.
Be moved and second. So we're on C, and
Yes.
Parul, do you want to say anything? But I believe there's a question from Councillor Newman to start things off, because I'm going to say, no doubt you'll say taken as read. So.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. I did actually ask Pearl and Andrew previously, with respect to C Roman numeral 1, the words using prepaid bin tags, whether that was a necessary inclusion, and if it's and the reason is that if we don't need to, and if we're not going to prepaid bin tags for Auckland and Manukau as part of the rollout of the weekly pay-as-you-throw, if we don't require them, I would prefer that those words be deleted from the recommendation. So can I get clarification around that before I suggest an amendment?
That amendment will be fine. The consultation was on the move to pay-as-you-throw, and the implementation's 3 years out, so we don't have to. The decision is around moving to pay-as-you-throw, so that's fine.
Councillor Parul is and the team are happy with that, so we don't actually need an amendment, but Councillor Newman's suggestion can mean we just take those
deleting
5 words out.
Using prepaid bin tags, because that's not relevant to the recommendation.
Yep.
The technology is in place that will not require those. Thank you.
Okay, now Councillor Walker, I believe, has some questions as well.
Sure, I've got 3 quick questions for clarification. First of all, just looking at C3, which talks about the $67 per year. My reading is that the $67 applies to those parts of Auckland that are receiving the service. That's correct?
Yep.
So you don't pay the $67 for some time up front. It would be useful to have a slight change in the wording to make that clear, Mr. Chair. And then the other question that I've got, which also goes to the food waste collection service. The assumption that I'm making is that we are going to be progressing the procurement for the service at large, and that is implicit in 3. Is that the case?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I don't know whether it's necessary to have any wording for that, but that's my understanding, because otherwise we're not going to be able to deliver if we don't procure. And then the other question I've got just goes to the Hibiscus Coast, which presently doesn't have any service provided by council, and that is, can you confirm that it's possible to have a pay-as-you-throw service for the Hibiscus Coast in 2019, and that service might be brought forward ahead of a wider service for the legacy Rodney area, and that could include a bolt-on to the North Shore contract, for example, or some other facility.
Through you, Chairman, the waste plan talks about introducing a service, refuse pay-as-you-throw service for Rodney in 2019-20, and that is planned. We are also we're doing the Section 17A review as well, and that would further determine in terms of how that is delivered. But it is that is planned, and I take note of what you're saying in terms of introducing it sooner in Hibiscus Coast before it goes to Rodney if possible.
And the rationale for that, Mr Chair, is the Hibiscus Coast is an urban area of some size, immediately adjacent to the North Shore, and somewhat different to much of Legacy Rodney. It doesn't have any service at this point, so it's very easy for us to do, frankly, whatever we want. So I'm happy with those suggestions, Mr Chair, and I just wonder whether there may be a need to have a note in 3, Urban Auckland of...
Urban Auckland where the service is provided,
correct.
which
That'll
is
do it.
which is close to the language we use in the actual rate setting,
That's right.
because the rate is will probably be per service. So where the service is provided will...
And is there any need to make a mention of procurement?
That's covered off in the previous decisions of the procurement.
Okay, thank you, Mr Chair.
No further questions, no further comments. Councillor Stewart, a question?
Yes, the question is, could you just tell me how many people actually submitted in the Auckland plan that supported the $67 targeted rate?
In the long-term plan,
Yes.
sorry, I looked at the wrong page. I don't have the numbers in the attachment, but there was 40% in support and 60% opposed of those who submitted. I can't remember the exact number of feedback responses we received.
So 67% didn't support.
60%, 40% for, 60 against.
60% against.
Yeah.
It's just that, probably aware, a lot of people actually compost and put the food down the gurgler and, yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Sayers, you have a question or it can be comment because you're down to the last person.
Yeah, question, Ross. Thanks. So that last answer, what was that specifically to? Just the 60-40 split?
That was of those feedback responses that we received on the targeted rate for the food scrap collection.
Right. Yep.
It's 40% in favour, 60% opposed. I think it was around 1,000, but I wouldn't rely on my memory for that.
Okay. No, that was. So I had two questions. That was the first one. Just confirm, and then just confirming on the other pays you throw, it was reversed from the figures I see. That 60% in support and 40% not in support.
Yes.
Yeah, just confirming this. Yeah, okay, thank you.
And the cost is not 67 because of the savings you can make with your reduction in your pay as you throw, which puts it in the $30 to $40 range actual effect.
Just in addition as well, the ones that did not support it also talked about it being either in general rates or other mechanisms rather than a targeted rate.
Okay. Yep. Right, councillor, we have a mover and a seconder. I'm looking around, last calls here, so I'm going to put all of C, 1, 2, 3. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against?
Oh,
Recorded? Recorded, councillor? Yep.
yeah, I'll have
Okay.
it recorded as well against.
Again, councillor Stewart and councillor Simpson recorded. So
And Ross, if I could just have it recorded against
Yep.
C3.
okay. Okay, so yep, we're going to councillor Sayers is against C3.
That's the food scraps, is it? Have I got the right one? Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep.
And I was an abstain.
Right. We are now moving on to D.
She's having it recorded too.
I'm just going to ask the Mayor whether he wants to speak to this, gives the mover.
Well, very briefly, Mr Chair. I mentioned, but it seems like days ago now at the start of the session this morning, I have had the chance to talk with the Chair of the Board of the Ports of Auckland and the Chief Executive. They are broadly in favour of the proposal, though their formal position is that this is for us to decide, not for them. They are more than happy with the Memorandum of Understanding to preserve their right to make commercial decisions free of political interference, which I think is absolutely critical They are very happy with the way in which the appointments to the Board of Directors will be made. They also believe that there are net advantages in having the direct connection between council and the port, so we talk to each other rather than over the top of a middle person, which hasn't always helped our relationship. With all of those things, there is a savings of at least $8 million. If we can make those savings and put that money into more positive outcomes, why wouldn't we do it?
Questions? Councillor Watson?
I want to speak to it. I don't need...
Yeah, well, just any questions? I think everyone's fairly clear on this. So, Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Yeah, I want to speak against this recommendation to disestablish ACIL, and I want to put it in the wider context of ACIL's performance over the years. I was reading their Chairman and Chief Executive's review of the financial year back in 2013-14, and that was a time, of course, where there was a review of the 7 CCOs that had been established, and at that stage ACIL rather naively, I think, welcomed the review, citing that they welcomed room for opportunity and the chance to ensure Auckland gets greater returns from its investments. And I'll repeat that little phrase, greater returns from its investments, because at that point, and indeed subsequent to 2013-14, ACIL were very good at getting greater returns from their investments. Their whole trajectory was one of quite impressive returns to the Auckland ratepayer. Certainly became a little difficult for them to get those sort of returns after the diversified assets portfolio was taken out of their control. That was that $330 million rainy day fund that once it came into our control was gone in a little over a year. And I would say, Mr Chair, that for me anyway, and part of my reason for speaking against this recommendation, is part of an ongoing trend where income producing assets like marinas, which are currently on the chopping block, are getting hocked off. So assets that the council has that returns money and saves ratepayer rates getting put up are being sold. And in this case, we had a CCO who had quite a degree of expertise and certainly had a track record of success. If you looked at that diversified assets portfolio at the time of 2013-14, it was returning 12.4%, and the predicted or the long-term projection at that point was 4.4%, so they're 8% above that. In subsequent years, after we'd already disposed of the 330 million, if you talk to fund managers, the returns then were 18 or 20 odd %. So that would have even been a return double that which they'd got around about 2013-14. I guess that's, people will say, as they often do around this place, well, you're talking about old news there, we don't want to rehash that. What I do want to rehash it is in the context of contestable advice, because what ACIL did, and which I don't think we've had a sufficiently informed view towards, they viewed upon these income producing assets like the diversified assets portfolio as not only a return on investment, and a significant one, but as a positive contribution to the improved liquidity position of council. And that was a point that they made just about in every single annual report that they did, that their income producing investments improved the council's liquidity position overall. We don't have that. Instead, we have, particularly in the other CCOs, ironically enough, that aren't under any sort of threat, a kind of Barfoot and Thompson mentality where it's just sell it off, just get rid of it, whether it brings you in an income or not, it doesn't really matter. So the one organisation, the one CCO in this council family that did have expertise in producing income and quite impressive income in that is being disestablished, And if we take the diversified assets portfolio as a precedent, the funds then built up over many, many years then are gone and next to no time at all. So I don't agree with the manner in which they have been essentially initially sidelined in terms of the portfolio they had, and now to be finished off altogether. Because if there was one entity in the council that was producing income as opposed to just selling it, it was ACIL. And today the vote essentially goes to taking them out altogether. So I won't be voting against it. I appreciated their expertise and appreciated the independence of view that presented a different perspective on the use of our assets.
Thank you, John. Councillor Watson, sorry, trying to keep formal. Is there anyone else wishes to speak?
Couple of questions.
Councillor Cashmore, questions, and then Councillor Walker.
So the sell down of the diversified asset portfolio, or the airport shares, or indeed Ports of Auckland, would go outside our decision-making portfolios. It would be a strategic move that would require a vote of the full council. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that would come within the definition of the Companies Act, and in certain instances might require a special consultative procedure under the Local Government Act.
Yep. So I think that sort of gives us the protection that we are looking for to counter Councillor Watson's point, and the decision about the diversified asset portfolio was one that this council made after consultation with the executives and from expert advice. So I just leave that where it is, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Walker.
Sure. I'd just like to join the comments of my fellow councillor, John Watson. I think this fund was an excellent holding entity for assets, and certainly strategic assets. In my view, there are a number of assets around this organisation that I would suggest are strategic, that the community would suggest are strategic, which are assets like marinas and others that generate an income. And frankly, an entity like ACIL would be a better place to keep them than, frankly, the present situation where they're really not identified other than for sale. And that is what is happening. This council is presently trading off the investment decisions that were made by previous legacy councils. We're trading off that now, and we're selling those assets down, a number of them strategic. And once that silver's gone, frankly, the assets and the income and the strategic nature of those assets is going to be gone, and Auckland will be all the poorer for it. So I'm not at all happy about the loss of this entity, Mr. Chair. I can see it's a done deal, but it's disappointing.
Councillor Darby.
In short, an unnecessary layer in governance and management that will be stripped out and deliver savings of 500,000, 800,000, possibly more. I think we can deal better with that money and deliver something real for Aucklanders.
Okay, Councillor Darby. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd never considered putting our assets, other than what's in with ACIL, taking them from Panuku to put them in here. I don't think we've ever had that conversation. That's news to me. But, you know, and all due respect to Panuku, they're only doing what we ask them to do. They're not a rogue CCO. They're actually following the strategic direction we've set. So, you know, I don't think they warranted that kind of criticism. My only concern about this is, and I've said it right at the beginning, I want to make sure there is strong barriers, or enough still arm's length, between governance and the management of the port. The port's got to be let to get on and do its business and deliver a dividend for us and develop in line with their own port plan. So if I can be reassured of that we won't be operating the port company from these tables, I'm happy, but that's what I'd like to comment on. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, I'll comment, but you've heard the Mayor give the assurance and that they are happier with the MOU, but I'm actually just going to ask the Chief Executive just to confirm as an objective.
Yep, thanks, Chair. So the ports, I think, took the initiative to draft an MOU because they wanted to be prepared in case the disestablishment occurred, and that's been worked on together, and we've got it to a point where they're expressing their satisfaction. I think we probably need to be a little bit careful in kind of rewriting history this afternoon, because when we did the CCO review back in 2015, we downsized ACIL in anticipation that this might be the place that we get to when the relationship between the port and the council reached a certain level of maturity and trust. And I think we're about to hit that point, and we're satisfied that we can support that through the CCO governance team and apply similar policies and obviously respect the Port Companies Act where we need to, that we're now well placed to provide all of the things that ACIL has been doing for the last few years.
Thank you.
Councillor Newman.
Yeah, I remember when this matter came up for whether we were going to put this out to consultation, and the vote was actually initially no, we weren't, and then there was an absolutely frantic discussion involving a number of people, and the vote was taken the following day to take it out to consultation. Chair, if I don't know if a division is required here. I don't want to support this. So if my vote against can be recorded in the absence of a division, and the reason I say that is I've become a little concerned in recent weeks about the way in which the debate around the port. It's almost like we use narrative as normalising a future approach to the ports. I think the ports are very topical in terms of the debate around what will happen to the ports in the future, and for that reason, and because I am becoming more suspicious about the way in which some people view the ports and their future, I actually like the ACIL model, and I like to try and get as much distance between the shareholders and the politics and the operational companies, and so therefore, Chair, I don't support this disestablishment, and I'm not sure how you're intending to procedurally address this matter. If you're going to be, are you taking Roman numeral DI
D1 1 to 9, and unless there's a request for it.
Yeah, okay. Well, I will, if you can record my vote against that, thank you.
Right. Councillor Fletcher, you've just come in. Do you wish to comment on this item?
Yes, I wanted to get back in time for this, so thank you for your indulgence on that. I mean, the whole purpose of Auckland Council Investments Limited was to have that strong commercial focus to the ownership and management of our assets. And from my perspective, I believe they have performed. I think they've been consistent and they have met our expectations. So really, I'm struggling to understand the purpose of the disestablishment. We're told that we'll save ourselves between 500 to 800,000, but weighing it up, there's a great risk, as I see it, that for the ratepayers of Auckland, they may not get the commercial return on investments, and that could be negatively impacted. I'm grateful to the Mayor. I mean, he's gone to a lot of trouble on the issue of board appointments for the ports of Auckland, and so I commend him in trying to find a point with the Memorandum of Understanding, but I must admit I still have some real disquiet about this. So I don't wish to support the disestablishment and would really like also my vote to be recorded against this, please.
Okay, well, sorry, we didn't ask you to speak because we're taking everything as read at the moment, so, sorry, the Mayor.
In reply?
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for those that have contributed. Let me just try to put your mind at ease on the two issues that have come up. The decision about ownership of any asset was never a decision of ACIL. They never commented on it. They never sought to influence on it. That is purely a decision of this body. We decided to sell our shares in the diversified asset portfolio in order to invest directly in capital needs or to avoid the equivalent amount of borrowing. We made that decision. ACIL was neither a protector nor an influencer of that decision or of whether we retain assets. So really the argument around who owns the assets, it's purely ours. ACIL never contributed in any way whatsoever. Secondly, just to reassure both Councillor Cooper and Councillor Fletcher, I have no intention of being part of a council that decides we can run a port. We can't. That's not our role. It's not our commercial role to make the commercial decision. It's not our role as a body to make the commercial decisions about running the port. That would be, frankly, in my view, disastrous. We don't have those skills and competencies. And therefore I ask the question, and I ask the question of a lot of people, well, what role does ACIL, what does it perform for us? What does it achieve for us? And I couldn't find a role that was helpful. I could find a role that was unhelpful, and that was that it was used as a barrier between our ability to even communicate with the ports. And we saw what happened over what led to the Ports Future study, because the ports and the council were not talking together. We did take it out to consultation, and the results of that consultation was more than 2 to 1 of the public in favour of doing away with ACIL. 61% in favour, 26% against. So we got a very clear message back from the public that wasn't sure that there was a role that was worth spending $8 or $9 million on over the next decade to sustain. If I thought there was a role to sustain, I wouldn't mind spending the money. I hate spending money on something that I don't think delivers anything to the people of Auckland or to our council. So, on the two issues of concern that I think Councillor Watson and Walker raised and Councillor Cooper and Fletcher, I want to give an absolute assurance this will not influence our position around the decision on ownership, and this will not lead to commercial interference in the day-to-day decisions of the port. It will enable us to communicate better and more directly. The ports agree with that. The ports think they're safeguarded, and we save $8 million.
Okay, councillors, it's my intention to put it together, and I've had Councillor Newman has noted he wants his vote against it. Councillor Fletcher, and
mine
Councillor
also.
Simpson, Councillor Watson,
Let's call it division.
Councillor
then.
Sayers.
Take a decision.
Right, let's call it division.
And Walker.
That's probably the easiest thing. Right, we'll call it division.
On just that one? No, on the whole. D.
No, just D. We're doing D as a block.
Yeah, right.
In isolation.
Righto.
We've got a number of assets that could be in.
Okay.
I'm confused.
Against, Ross?
Yes,
Wait,
against.
Ross.
Thinking about something else. So.
Come on, Ross, come and sit over here.
That was a no.
Was that a yes, Ross? Thank you.
Councillor Barkley.
Yes.
Councillor Casey.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Cashmore.
Yes.
Councillor Collins.
Against.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Darby.
For.
Councillor Philippaina.
Aye.
Councillor Fletcher.
No.
Mayor Goff.
For.
Councillor Hills.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Hulse.
Aye.
Councillor Newman.
Against.
Councillor Sayers.
Against. Hang on, what's happening there?
Sorry, Newman.
I was against.
Eben is against. Yep.
Councillor Sayers,
Against.
Councillor Simpson. Councillor Stewart,
Against?
Member Taipari,
Aye.
Councillor Wayne Walker,
Against?
Councillor Watson.
Against?
Carried 11-8. Right, councillors, we have a proposal on E. I don't think we need, so I'm happy just to put E. But of course, if there's questions or, thank you, Alan. Any questions? No. So I'll put E. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? No. Right, councillors, we will now move to